And there we go. That's
Breaking
how
my
it is.
thumb 'cause it feels so good.
Nice. Okay, let me shout this out real quick, and then we'll be ready to hop into episode 5. We took a leave of absence, unfortunately, but
Everybody was sick.
we were sick. We were sick as junk. This is upcoming. It should be public now. What in the world? Let's see.
I got it.
Oh, is it live?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's not showing live for me. Good morning, novice. We're back. We're recovering. I'm going to get all my coughs out now because when we actually recorded, I'm going to hold back. I did not mean to send that. Put it in live again. Everyone. We are recovering from sickness. I'm going to tag you in it. At Drew. Music by Drew. And I. And then I'll put this in my community tab. And then we'll be ready to rock. But we'll also, at the same time, be ready to rock. Oh, now this sounds good coming from my end.
Yes, sir.
And then I like that everything is just press a button, go now. You both were you both sick? Yeah, I think I had the flu or something like that. And then Andrew got strep.
I was getting over strep, and then I got at the tail end of me getting better on strep. I ended up getting a stomach bug all last week. So
yeah, it's just 'tis the season.
In the bathroom.
Let's see. Live now with episode 5. I still need to make our. So we have. I need to do shorts. I'll do all those today. I think I've been putting it off, but I'm sure we'll have a hot take in this video.
I'm sure.
Okay. I'll do my other stuff. Got my cough drops in. Oh shit.
Nice. I have my coffee.
Yep. Dude, they should make. I think they have them already. Coffee drops. They have them. Have you seen those coffee pouches? They're like.
No.
So there are coffee pouches like you put in like like a Zen pouch where it's like a nicotine pouch, but like it's a caffeine pouch and it's like a coffee pouch. It tastes like coffee. It's a cool idea, but I think they're pretty gross. So it's like if I'm not drinking the coffee, it is pretty gross. Oh. 2 cough drops in. I used to stream like this too when I was sick and record videos like this when I was sick.
Nice.
Good to be up here, sup gamers. Hello. Tristan is the gamer of all time, in my opinion.
Gamer of all time.
Yeah, I have my list. And honestly, we could just hop right into this. This might be well, I said that the last time. It's like, this could be a short episode, and then it was like an hour and a half. So, this one could be short. Pretty sure it will be. But today, we're ranking all of the FromSoft games. Sorry, that was gross. I spit a little bit. But ranking the FromSoft games from Demon Souls all the way to Elden Ring, excluding stuff like Kingsfield and like Armored Core. Because when people say Soulsborne, or Souls games, they typically mean that. So,
yeah.
And let me pull up the chat on my phone. Having chat on my phone will be way easier. And
That's
Andrew,
what I do.
I need my third monitor eventually. One of these days. One of those days. I get it eventually.
It's just one of those days.
Oh yeah, heck yeah. We just need to start. You know how podcasts have like intro songs?
Yeah.
It's just one of those.
Yeah.
We'll recreate it. Okay.
We'll have to recreate it.
Break Stuff is Break Stuff, right? By Limp Bizkit?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay. Break Stuff. I just feel like you could justify ripping someone's head off. Oh. It's awesome. Okay, you ready to record?
Those are...
Okay, 3, 2, 1.
And welcome back to the Things We Like podcast with Andrew and Brooks. I'm Andrew, here with Brooks. Brooks, how are we doing today on this fine Monday morning?
Well, honestly, I can say that you and I have both been better, but we've also been worse.
I was going to say, you notice I didn't say Happy Monday.
Yeah, this is
because it's not a Happy Monday.
It's not a happy Monday. It's an objective Monday. It's a Monday. It is the Sunday hangover. We have to endure it. Andrew and I have both been sick. We were supposed to do this last Thursday, but I ended up being way too sick, and then Andrew got sick again. So it just wasn't worth it. So we just put it off for a week. I uploaded a video on, for the people that are listening, I posted a video on the actual main channel, the main podcast channel, and that's sort of kind of
the like channel.
Yeah, and that's sort of kind of the gist of how things are going to go. If we miss an upload, or if we miss a stream day, or if we miss an episode day, we'll find a way to post some kind of content, whether it's, hey, I'm sick, or hey, I'm on the road, or hey, I'm doing this, or here's this cool thing, or whatever. One of us will find a way,
Yeah.
So it'll be nice, engaging, a little bit different than other podcasts, and I like that. I have 2 cough drops in, so I'm going to be doing my best to control that, because I'll probably
double dropping.
Yeah. I assume that I'll be talking more this one, because today...
Yeah.
We are ranking the FromSoft games from Demon Souls to Elden Ring into what I consider the worst and the best. I want to preface this,
and this
now.
Is a Brooks focused thing, because I have only ever watched these games be played, so I'm probably going to have a bunch of questions.
Oh, I noticed my lights aren't on over there, but I don't care. Whatever. I'm not getting up to turn them on. It's fine.
But yeah, I'm going to have a bunch of questions.
Well, it's cool because I can introduce someone to the series through my own lens, and I'm gonna again preface this now. The Souls games are some of the most highly debated games on their quality ever, because the Souls fan base is very passionate, almost to a fault, and There's gatekeeping. There is people straight up being like, this is a bad take, this is stupid. There's kind of some meanness in there from what I've noticed, and it's kind of notorious for that. But this is not going to happen here. All of what I'm saying is subjective. All these games are subjective. If you like them, that's awesome. If you hate them, that's awesome. But anyways, I'll go ahead and start. So there are 7. We're ranking 7 games today. And
I was gonna say, so what year does this start?
Let me look that up actually. So we're gonna start from the release of Demon Souls.
What's the first game?
Demon Souls. Demon's Souls release date. It's February
2009.
Yeah. So it's and then there's the remake on the PS5, but I'm not ranking them in order of when they came out. I'm giving a number ranking. I'm ranking them, to me, what I think is the worst and the best. I don't really even think there's a bad game in the bunch, which is funny for the 7th pick, because some people will argue. So we're going from Demon Souls all the way to Elden Ring. So my first, in order, number 7, and I have them noted on my phone so I can keep track. Number 7 is the most controversial on this list, and that's Dark Souls 2. In my opinion, I think Dark Souls 2 is the worst. However, I think that Dark Souls 2 generally isn't a bad game. I think it's the worst Souls game, but I don't think it's a bad game. Here's why I don't think it's a bad game. Because Dark Souls 2 has an amazing game and amazing intentions buried under layers of bullshit. And it's so sad, because there's so many things to like and so many things to just straight up hate in this game. Like, the lore is amazing. I'm not amazing at reciting lore off the top of my head because my memory is doo-doo piss. However, I've watched a lot of videos.
There are also massive amounts of YouTube channels dedicated to the lore. From what I understand. There's
off the top of my head, there's like Vatividya, Smotown, Fextra Life, Ratatosker. Ratatosker is probably my favorite, personal favorite. And then you've got guys like Genji who make excellent videos. I hope it's pronounced Genji. If I mispronounce that, people will yell at me. People that make, and like Miss Chalice, who also do like lore stuff, and it's just very, very accessible to somebody like me, or they make it accessible to somebody like me who I can't remember how to tie my shoes half the time. So all that to say is, like, the lore in Dark Souls 2 is fascinating. It is like a perfect middle ground between 1 and 3, and it takes place in its own separate kingdom of Drang Lake. And all the things that happen, it just gives, without spoiling anything, it is a very nuanced take on the undead curse. I'll just say that. That's all I'll say.
So for me, a person who knows very, very little, let's maybe even, and for people like me that might be listening, let's do a description of what a Soulsborne game is considered.
So a Soulsborne game is pretty much anything from Demon Souls to Elden Ring. So it's like Demon Souls, Dark Souls 2, Bloodborne, Sekiro, Dark Souls 3, and then Elden Ring. So those 7
And then
games.
What's the gameplay style for all of these games?
So the gameplay style is like, it's like a RPG, action, fantasy type deal. Mm-hmm. You have stats, you can build characters. There's also the combat, the boss designs, the lore. It's the story is told in a very indirect way, and it's told through like item descriptions and contextual or context clues, I guess. So it rewards people.
So it's not an overt.
No, it's not like
story.
There's like an intro to every game, and it kind of sort of sets up the vagueness of it, but the nuance of the story comes out in the gameplay and in the item descriptions and in the context clues. And like Miyazaki is very the creator, like the father of the Soulsborne games, Hidetaki Miyazaki, is famous for telling stories like this. Like, they're very indirect. Mm-hmm. and you kind of can sort of create the narrative yourself in a way, because it's like there are objective things that do happen, but there are also areas where you can fill in the gaps yourself, which make it a more personalized experience, which is very, very nice.
That's very cool.
It is great. I love it. I love the lore in these games. It's kind of how I'm approaching Hollow Knight right now, where I'm like, I'll focus on purely gameplay for the first time, and then when I am done with it, I deep dive into all the lore that I can, and then it just becomes a complete experience. And then on my next playthrough, which I will play them again, I pay attention to those things and really absorb what is being talked about. And it's just a super fulfilling experience. It's like art in its purest form to me, and the FromSoft Soulsborne formula and games have like changed my life in a way. But anyway, back to the ranking. If you have any more questions, you can always stop me and tell me.
Yes. So that was a general overview for myself to make sure that they were all what I thought they were.
Right. So, Dark Souls 2 is the most controversial. I've spoken to people personally who think Dark Souls 2 is the best game in the series, which I don't agree with. I have seen there are countless videos on defending Dark Souls 2, tearing Dark Souls 2 apart. People hate it. People love it. I've interacted with people in comment sections of like I think this area is shitty, and people are like, I actually really like this area, and it's almost like I feel like there is almost like an urge to be contrarian with Dark Souls 2 for people who really love it. Like is almost like a need, like a need to be contrarian towards that game. But just forgetting all of that, from my own personal experiences, it is the most frustrating experience, gameplay wise, just
Okay.
gameplay wise. For example, in all the games, you have full 3D 360 movement, right? Or I guess 360 movement. In Dark Souls 2, you're limited to 8 directions. Like, your character will only run in, like, 8 directions, and it makes combat and movement really weird. It's like, why would you do that? And it doesn't sound like a lot, but it does affect the
very
gameplay.
Strange.
And it's got, like, 8 directions. And also, if I'm wrong about any of these things, that's okay. Please correct me in the comments or the chat. I don't care about being wrong. I just want to make sure that I'm articulating my points well.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I struggle with that in a lot of ways. But another thing is the stamina bar. So in every other, well, besides Sekiro doesn't have one, but all the FromSoft games with a stamina bar, when your stamina depletes all the way, it comes back, and then you move. There's 2 types of speed. You move slow, or you just move normal, and then you move fast when you're using stamina or attacking. Managing your stamina bar is key to combat, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Dark Souls 2, when your stamina bar depletes all the way, your character slows down. So there are 3 speeds of movement where if you are using your stamina, you're attacking, you're moving faster, you're dodging. If you're moving normal, you're just letting that stamina recover. But if your stamina bar goes all the way down, it slowly comes back. And your like character will physically do this. And for the people who are listening, they like pant almost, and it looks like they're exhausted. And
So you actually get hindered
yes.
for letting your stamina drop.
Yes,
all
it is
the way?
a pain in the fucking ass. It is punishing for no. That's one of the biggest critiques that I have about Dark Souls 2. It is bullshit for the sake of being bullshit. Like, for example,
Yeah.
there's an area called Iron Keep in the game, and it is probably the worst area in any of these games to run through, because there's just mobs and mobs and mobs and mobs and mobs of enemies, and they just throw them in. And a lot of areas in Dark Souls 2 feel like they're designed maliciously rather than designed carefully. They seem like they're designed to, hey, I'm going to fuck you over on purpose. But a good thing about Dark Souls 2 that no other Souls game does that I like, if you clear out the enemies enough times, they disappear permanently. So, yeah.
Kind of nice.
It is nice. However, there are areas in the game where the enemies you could spend hours of your life just going through and killing all the enemies. Yeah, in theory, on paper, yeah, that's great. But in practice, in other Souls games where, like, I can just run through the areas if I want. If I've played the game already, if I've experienced the game and I'm on a repeat playthrough, I can run through the areas. That's usually what I do in any game, because I am not a big fan of PvE, because it just gets annoying once you do it over and over and over and over, and you just want to experience the bosses. But like on a first time through, you go through and fight all the enemies, and it's like, oh, this is combat, this is engaging, and like, but anyways, I don't like that about the game. And there are 2 versions of the game. There's the vanilla version and the Scholar of the First Sin version, which is the only time that's ever been done, to my knowledge, where the vanilla version had different enemy placements and stuff like that. And then Scholar of the First Sin version arguably enhances and also ruins Dark Souls 2 experience. And every person's going to be different. Because, for example, there is an enemy early on in the vanilla version called a Hide Knight, and you kill it and it drops a sword, and it's a lightning-based sword. And it's great for early game, and it helps early game players if they're struggling. And in the Scholar version, that knight is removed. And if you want that sword, you have to grind the hide knights. And the drop rate is really low. But if you kill them too many times and don't get the item or the armor that you want, you have to... they're gone. And you have to use this thing called a bonfire aesthetic to reset the world, but it puts it in New Game Plus, which is a great thing and also bad, because if you're at a level to where you can't handle the enemies, then you're fucked. But if you want to get like if you're trying to speed run or get a certain, for example, if you want a ring that buffs you, but there are like levels, there's like +2, +3, whatever. If you want a really good ring, for example, you can use a bonfire aesthetic in Iron Keep, fight the boss of that area, and then get an even better ring. Or you can go to certain areas, because it will change the layout of item placements and stuff like that. And sometimes you get more enemy encounters in higher new games, which is awesome. That is a great idea. But it also sucks ass if you're trying to exploit it. So it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So, and this is just on Dark Souls. All of this is just specifically for Dark Souls too. So every game is pretty drastic from game to game as far as like the rules.
Well,
set
all
and
games are.
things.
It's actually the opposite. All games are relatively consistent compared to Dark Souls 2. Dark Souls 2 because because Miyazaki
was the only one that is this.
It's the only one
different.
that's just this fucking crazy, and experimental, because Miyazaki wasn't directly involved in it. They had like essentially like another team come in to do that while Miyazaki was working on Bloodborne, allegedly. I think that's what happened. But I'm trying to think of other examples before I just cap off Dark Souls 2. I have talked to people who argue that Dark Souls 2 is great and it's awesome. It's the best in the series. I can't personally say that. I've beaten the game like twice. I played through all the DLC. I beat all but like one boss, I think, because I didn't want to go through. One of the bosses, for example, is called the Dark Lurker. And getting to the Dark Lurker is an optional boss. It is a pain in the fucking ass and drains your resources like crazy. Just for like an okay boss fight. And I'm like, that is not... I've done it once. I'll never do it again. Like, that was just... Holy shit, that was horrible. And I think, honestly, the world design and the runbacks to bosses are also terrible. There are so many... There's a boss called the... I think it's the Smelter Demon. Let me double check. Smelter Demon. It's the there's like two of them in the game. It's a DLC Smelter Demon, right? The run back to that boss is so bad. And Old King, or let's see, there's another one that's even worse than that, or arguably worse than that. It's hold on. I want to make sure I'm forgetting his name off the top of my... Yes, it's Sir Alone. He's the leader of the Alone Knights, and that's part of the game. The run back to Sir Alone, which is an actual great boss fight, is so punishing for like no reason. It is horrific. And all that to say, you could literally just scratch everything of what I said. In my own personal experience, Dark Souls 2 has been consistently the most frustrating Souls game to experience. There are so many good things, like Majula, for example, is the hub world. Think of Peach's Castle in Mario 64 as a hub world.
Yeah.
Majula, I think, is the best hub world and has one of, if not the best, musical composition of any area in the Souls series. Like, that could be a hot take, but Majula is great. It's like this. It's got this calming music. It's beautiful to look at. It's amazing. When you get there, you're like, oh, every time it's so peaceful.
Yeah.
And it's like and it's kind of like Firelink Shrine, but I like Majula better because it's just like, oh, it's just everything about Majula is, I think it's perfect. I genuinely think it's perfect. All that to say, my final thoughts on Dark Souls 2. Again, I think Dark Souls 2 is a great game buried under several layers of feces. And like, I love a lot of things about the game, and I'm sure there's things that I'm forgetting off the top of my head that I love about the game. But there's a lot of things about the game that I hate, and I'm sure I'm forgetting a lot of those things off the top of my head too. I've beaten the game multiple times. I've played the DLCs. I've beaten the DLCs. And from my conclusion, there is a good game in it. The lore is great. There's a lot of mechanics that are great, like power stancing is amazing. It defined the combat in the series, which power stancing is basically just like having, like if you have two great swords, you get a completely new moveset for them, and it makes them better to have, as opposed to just one great sword. Oh, love it. It could have been better, but what we got is what we have to experience. And that's just the way it is.
Yeah. It is what it is.
So
bottom of the list.
It is the bottom of my personal list for sure. So the next game in the series that I want to talk about, I think is the 6th, is Sekiro. That's also a hot take. And Sekiro is not very low because of the quality of the game.
So second from the bottom, Sekiro.
Sekiro is phenomenal. It is just the hardest. I think Sekiro is the hardest of all of these games. And you know what sucks? It's essentially, if you water it down a lot, it's a rhythm game. And you and I are both musicians. I suck at it.
Yeah.
I'm good at Guitar Hero. I suck at Sekiro. Because the parry mechanic is timing. So if you get attack, there's one enemy in the game that attacks you like this. It goes da 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 da, and you have to like that. And that's one of my favorite mechanics of Sekiro, is learning that. It's so hard, but once you get it, it's amazing. I haven't beaten Sekiro personally. There are 2 games that I haven't beaten on this list. However, I feel like I've played enough of the games to know and to be able to assess how I feel about them. And this list could absolutely change once I do beat them. Every Sekiro player, even the bad ones like me, I'll admit I suck at the game. I'm terrible at it. And the learning curve is very, very steep. But once you get to the top of that, you're golden.
So Sekiro, I'm seeing it's a lot more Asian inspired rather than like high fantasy armor.
Yeah,
like
it's
middle.
Yeah, it is much more rooted in Japanese history and mythology than the other games
which is
are.
very cool.
Like, you've got like the
cool
Uchigatana
take.
in multiple games of like Dark Souls 1 and 3 and Elden Ring, for example. But like Sekiro is like the game. It's similar to Ghost of Tsushima.
I was gonna say it's similar to Ghost of Tsushima, but it seems like the general Dark Souls feel is more of like a Lord of the Rings kind of
like high fantasy,
high fantasy feel, and this is definitely like Far East fantasy.
Yeah, and they're definitely
also.
Yeah,
I was gonna say also it says it doesn't have quite as many of the role-playing and character creation elements.
That's true.
As much as the usual Soulsborne games.
Right. Sekiro is essentially a very streamlined, straightforward sort of experience, but it is a phenomenal experience. You know, it's really hard on purpose. It is difficult, but once you get past that, sorry, I'm like moving this cough drop around. Once you get past that and it clicks for you, every Sekiro player, even the bad ones like me, has a click moment in the game. You'll fight a boss, you'll be fighting an enemy, and everything just clicks. There's a boss in the game that I got to personally that I'll never forget it. It's one of the most unforgettable Soulsborne experiences in my life, where I was struggling. I got there, and I just got it, and it worked, and I did it, and I whooped his ass, and I was like, yeah! You know, it was amazing. It was a great experience. And the only reason it's ranked so low is because I think it's the least accessible for just casual players, and I consider myself a casual player of any video game.
Because it's super hard, because it's super difficult.
The learning curve, it demands a lot of you, but if you're willing to get good at it, and that's the only one where it's like, okay, get good is like actually a thing, I think.
Yeah. You just got to put your time in. And
there are other elements of the Souls games where it's like, yeah, you got to improve and your skills have to get better.
Sure.
But like Sekiro is the get good game, because once you do and you understand, like, you are also right about the role playing elements, because instead of like stats and level up stuff, for example, the way you get stronger and get more attack power is you defeat the bosses and get memories of the bosses. That's where they were talking about that for the Elden Ring DLC, and that's sort of how the DLC is going to work. And I think that idea is inspired from that game. So you'll beat a boss, you'll get a memory, a remembrance, you use the boss memory, and you get more attack power, which is great. You have the Shinobi prosthetic arm thing, which you can throw ninja stars, you can use a spear, you can use a fan to block things, you can use firecrackers to stun like horses and stuff like that. You have tools at your disposal to make fights easier, but every boss in the game can be beaten solely with the sword and nothing but the sword, which is amazing. Like, it gives people utility, it gives you tools to solve problems, but if you're good enough, you could only use the sword, and that's it.
That's crazy.
So Sekiro, it is lower purely because of the difficulty and the learning curve is so high, but Sekiro is a phenomenal game, and I recommend everybody at least give it a shot. So now we'll hop into the chat, because we've read two of these.
Yep.
Gordon
There's
Schultz and Eli, what's up? Thanks for showing up, buddy. Gordon Schultz says, I hated the enemies stopped spawning. It messed up farming for me so many times. Sure, you can use it as an aesthetic, but everything gets harder. Exactly. That's what I was saying earlier. If you want a specific...
so it's a good thing and a bad thing.
Yeah, that's a lot of Dark Souls 2, is like the things that they create and the ideas that they implement are like great, but not, you know, and it's all subjective. It's like, what are you looking for as a player? You know, for me, I think it is awesome for areas like Iron Keep, when you want to just, that's a great area that I grind. Like, I'll literally grind in Dark Souls 2 if I play it. I'll kill all the enemies in Iron Keep, level up a time, use the armor that I get from those guys, and then I'll use the bonfire aesthetic, kill them all again, get a bunch of souls, level up, and then I just whoop the game's ass. Like, that's how I play the game. And Eli says, limited mechanics in the movement, isn't even full 360, like I was saying. It's just 8 directions in 2, which is like unforgivable. Again, that I agree with.
It's also wild for a 2014 game.
Yeah. Yeah.
2014 is wild to be limiting people's directions.
Agreed. Gordon says, Dark Souls 2 has the most potent poison by far, which I don't remember it, but also there are a lot of areas that are poison-ish. Like, there's one boss that I won't spoil, for example, that like the whole arena is poison, and you can do something in the world to affect the boss arena. I think that's cool. That's a cool idea. However, if you don't know to do that, it fucks you in the ass. because there are multiple boss fights where you can interact with the environment if you're paying attention, which that was introduced in like Demon Souls too, but I'll get to that.
Yeah.
But multiple boss fights where what you do in the overworld affects the arena that you fight it in. And
Interesting.
Again, double-edged sword. Let me read the rest of this. Eli says, Sekiro is so hard it's absurd. I agree. I'm ass at it. You're a shinobi and it's explicitly set in Japan. But there are also fantasy elements to it. So there's like spirits and stuff like that, which I won't spoil what's in the game. It's insane. It's crazy what's actually in the game. Eli also says, combine that jank directionally with all the other stupid punishing aspects and you're getting heavily punished for the mechanical aspects of the game failing you. So frustrating. Yeah, I would say Dark Souls 2, to go back on that, is the most frustrating. And it's frustrating for the wrong reasons. It's not frustrating because it's like, oh, damn, I need to get better at this. It's frustrating. It was almost designed maliciously, like I said. It was like, what can we do? How many ganks can we put in here?
How can we make this intentionally harder?
Yeah,
for
and
everybody?
it's just a pain in the ass. I want to play all the games in order, like, because I just got a PS5 and I'll get the Demon Souls remake eventually, but I want to play all the games in order and like just explain what I like and don't like about them, because I love those games so much. I do love Dark Souls 2. It has a place in my heart, but I will admit that it is the most frustrating one. Okay.
Yeah.
So the next game I'm going to get to, number 5, is Demon Souls. Talking about Demon Souls. I mentioned Ratatoskr earlier, and if the stars aligned and we ever get Ratatoskr on the podcast, it would be a dream come true for me. I love this guy's content. He is very analytical. He's not afraid to be a hater, which is awesome. I love that. There's a quote that he has in one of his videos. It's talking specifically about Demon Souls. He's like, you could think I'm a hater. It's like, I'm going to misquote him, so I'm not going to quote it. But it's just really funny. He's very like self-aware, and he's very intelligent, very articulate. He has one of the best He has one of my favorite videos talking about Demon Souls and the Demon Souls remake, because Demon Souls came out on the PS3 originally. Then it was remade or remastered or whatever. I think it was a remake, not a remaster, because a remaster is just an up-res of the original. But this is a remake. Like they remade it from scratch.
In the 2020 one.
But he argues something that I didn't even think about, of like the world and how it's designed, and like how people, based on like interviews that he read, it was like the game was intentionally changed because the remake developers thought they knew better than the original creators, which I think is bullshit. And I agree with him. And you would just have to play the games and know the games, so I'm not gonna like spoil anything for you. But the point is, he made a great observation of how the original Demon Souls has its own feel, and it has its own like world and mythos and its own background and context clues. Like I mentioned before, how the world is kind of, the story is told in subtle ways as well as like explicit ways. And his video on that is amazing. But the reason I'm ranking Demon Souls at number 5, it's primitive. It's the first one. There were games before Demon Souls. Like there's like Kingsfield and stuff like that inspired games like Demon Souls and stuff like that. Kingsfield is kind of like an old school RPG. It's like a old school first person RPG. And they are still pretty hard. But have you ever heard of like the Moonlight Sword? Are you familiar with that? That sword originated in the Kingsfield games. It's even in, there's a type of,
like the first game that FromSoft ever made.
I don't want to say the first game because I don't know off the top of my head, but it's one of the earlier games that influenced the Souls series.
According to Wikipedia, Kingsfield is like the first game they ever published.
Okay, well if that's the case, if that's what it is, then it is what it is. So I'll trust that. So let's say that it is. The Moonlight Sword basically came from that, and the type of sword, it even bleeds into Armored Core, which they also helped develop. There's a weapon in one of the
Yeah.
Armored Core games that mirrors it's like a bladed weapon, I think, that mirrors the Moonlight Sword. But anyway, I'm getting off track.
That's sick.
All that to say is, like, Demon Souls is primitive. It's like, when Demon Souls came out, there was nothing like it. You know, there was just, according to people that actually experienced it when it came out, I was a little late to it because I started with, like, Dark Souls. Oh, actually, I did start with Demon Souls, but it was much later.
Yeah.
I went from, like, Demon Souls, then Dark Souls, then Dark Souls 2. That's how I got introduced to it. But
Gotcha.
if you were to experience it, like, around our age in 2009 when it came out, there was nothing else like it, according to those people.
Yeah.
And Demon Souls is its own experience. It is like a lot like Dark Souls, but it's not quite, because you have a hub world, you have the Nexus, which is like the hub world, and you have sections of levels, and they're done in order of, like, area 1-3 and, like, 2-4 and 4-1 and stuff like that. So the structure of the levels are kind of, you know, bare bones in a way. Maybe not bare bones, but more standard to, like, a level design. It's cool. I love the Nexus, and I think it's cool, and I think the areas in the game are really cool, except for the poison swampy dead area, which there's a poison swamp in every game. Every FromSoft game.
Yeah.
You know that. Good morning, Ghost. By the way, shout out to Ghost Valley.
Gotta have the staples.
I love
in
him.
the game.
Love him. Yeah, and the poison swamps and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But Demon Souls has a mechanic called its world tendency, and they never used it again because it's shit. So world tendency,
Okay.
for example, there's pure world tendency, like white world tendency, or pure black world tendency, and stuff in between. Like, your world can vary. For example,
Okay.
if you do everything right, do all the quest lines, and help the NPCs, you stay white world tendency. If you die a lot and you kill NPCs and you're just a piece of shit, it goes to black world tendency. World tendency changes the difficulty of the game by introducing more summons, harder enemies, and different things like that.
Interesting.
On paper, it's interesting, but the fact that you die and it affects world tendency, that should not be a thing.
Negatively.
If that was taken out,
Yeah.
that would be fine. Because there are certain things that you can only get, like certain items and weapons you can only get, to my knowledge, from black world tendency and white world tendency. It is shitty, and the only reason it's shitty is because it's linked to your deaths. And the game is hard.
Yeah.
You're expected to die a lot to learn it. So the fact that you are being punished for something so arbitrary like that is stupid. Plus,
It's not a decision you make. It's a thing that is inevitably going to happen.
Yeah,
to you
if
just
you're
based on the
like, if
difficulty
you picked
level
up
of
the game right now and didn't know anything about it and went in completely blind, your ass would die a lot, and it would affect your world tendency, and that makes the game harder over time.
Yeah.
So you'd end up having to start the game over and over and over and over just to correct that, and it's so bad. If that one little piece was taken out, it would be fine, right? There's also a mechanic with your health. So when you die, you're like in a spirit form, essentially. And when there's like a human and spirit form. I don't know exactly what it's called. But when you die, you lose like 50% of your health. Like your overall health. Like if you have 100 HP and you're human, you die once, you go into spirit form, you have 50 health. And I'm like,
Okay.
that is bullshit. Dark Souls 2 also did that, but it did it gradually. There are rings in Demon Souls and Dark Souls 2 that negate that. Like, there's a ring that you can get in Demon Souls that only makes it go to 75%, for example.
Okay.
There's a ring in Dark Souls 2 called the Clutch Ring, I think. And if you die like 10 times, it only decreases your health this much, or like a little bit rather than like a lot. So
Yeah.
I think that that's fucked up. That's stupid, and it's just extra punishing for like just experiencing the game. That punishes learning, I think, because
Yeah.
you're gonna have to fail a lot before you get good at something. Like, again, you and I are musicians. We've failed a lot at learning an instrument, and we've had to take time to learn. Could you imagine? That's like trying to learn a song on guitar, and every time you hit the wrong note, somebody punches you in the face. Like, that's kind of how it is.
Yeah.
And it's like you're being punished for stuff that is inevitably going to happen. Like if you're trying to play a G chord and a D chord for the first time. The people listening can't see that I'm actually making the chords.
Yeah.
But if you, for example, if you're trying to learn a G major chord for the first time and you go ding 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 or ding ding ding, and somebody slaps you in the face every time you go ding 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 ding,
you're gonna give up pretty fast.
Ding 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 ding, ding 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 ding. That shit gets old fast, and that's kind of how Demon Souls is. It's like, oh man, I'm just losing. The fact that Sekiro also has that too, by the way. Sekiro has a mechanic of it's like dragon rot or something, or it's a sickness. I forget the actual name of it, but over time, if you die enough times, there will be certain NPCs that get this sickness and you can't complete their quest, or else you have to use an item to clear it. And I'm like, I fucking hate that. I hate that just by experiencing the game. Like, I get the game being hard. Like, that's not a problem. The actual combat and the execution of the way you play the game, that isn't a problem. But when I'm being punished for simply experiencing your game how it was intended to be experienced, go fuck yourself. Like, I love these games, but I will not shy away from that. I hate that, and I think it's bad.
Yeah.
So, what was I saying? Demon Souls? Demon Souls has that. However, Demon Souls has probably some of the most unique bosses in the series. They're gimmicky and experimental, but I love them. For example, there's a boss that is blind, and if they can't hear you, they will have a harder time finding you. There's a ring you can put on, if you find it, that silences your movement. That way, you can sneak around them, hit them, sneak away. They can't find you, hit them, and it makes the boss fight easier. That's brilliant. Like,
yeah, that's really smart.
And then they introduced another boss where there's a gimmick fight in a lot of Souls games where it's like big, towering figure, use specific weapon to kill them. Demon Souls introduced that with one of the bosses. And it's so epic. The concept is so great. It's awesome. Demon Souls is primitive.
But it was like Demon Souls was also like, wasn't it like the first of this kind of genre of game?
Without Demon Souls, that's why I put it a little above Sekiro, because without Demon Souls we wouldn't have Sekiro. Sekiro is just hard. It's a better game. Sekiro is a better game than Demon Souls by a long shot.
But it's just so much harder. It makes it less.
But it's way less accessible. At least Demon Souls is a slightly more accessible than because you can. If you're a magic user in Demon Souls, it's just game over. Like I'm a melee guy. I'm an Unga Bunga strength guy. But if you're a magic user, there's a spell in the game called Firestorm. I actually shout out to Dylan, United Gamer, United Hayes, whatever he wants to be called. My buddy Dylan, we raced the game a long time ago and recorded it. He whooped my ass. The dude has beaten the game without dying.
Oh, dang.
And the way he did
incredible.
It was a spell called Firestorm, which Firestorm's in a lot of the games, but you basically just use this spell, and it's like, and like a wall of fire comes out. I've seen him do it. You eviscerate bosses with it. It's like easy mode. So it is a little more accessible than Sekiro for certain cheeses and stuff. Also, in Demon Souls and in the remake, there's a Souls glitch where you can just get a bunch of souls and duplicate them and just blow through the game, which if you're learning the game, I actually kind of recommend.
Just makes the game generally easier. It's
funny too. It's hilarious. I recommend everybody try those at least in one playthrough just to be like, like overpowered. It's fun. So then
just
there's
to be incredibly OP.
Yeah, I think that is the case for sure for Demon Souls.
All right, so Demon Souls. What comes after Demon Souls in your list? Brooks?
What comes after Demon Souls is Bloodborne. Bloodborne is badass. I haven't beaten it yet, and I'm working on it.
What is the difference between? Is it like a story difference or a world difference, or like is there a drastic difference between Dark Souls and like the Demon Souls type deal and then Bloodborne? Like how Sekiro has like a pretty significant change.
So Bloodborne, when Bloodborne came out, it basically defined the combat of the series, because before with Dark Souls and Demon Souls and Dark Souls 2, it rewarded slow, patient, bulky gameplay. And I'll get to that later. But what Bloodborne introduced was fast, aggressive, get in there. Like, you're not allowed to rely on these strategies of big, bulky shield, hit, you hit, they hit, you hit. You have to be agile. You have to be quick. You have to actually get
in there. And
you actually have to
dodge around,
get good at the game.
Yeah,
and the combat in Bloodborne is so fucking good. So fucking good, and that's one of the big reasons that I love these games is the combat. And I like the slow and methodical. Or I like the slow and bulky style of like Dark Souls 1 and 2 and stuff like that. I can appreciate them because it makes the game playable. It's more patient. But Bloodborne's like, you gotta go, you gotta go, you gotta go. Hit him, hit him, hit him, you gotta hit him. For example, there is an HP rallying system. So, for example, if I get hit, I'm gonna lose some health. But if I can hit the enemy in a certain frame of time, I get health back. So, like, sick. You can regain health and not have to heal as much if you're aggressive enough. Also, there is kind of a negative side to this. If you know how you dodge roll in these games, like dodge roll is like dodging is a staple of these games. This game introduced like more of a strafe. Because it's not exactly a roll. Like, more often than not, you strafe rather than rolling. If you get hit in the middle of a strafe, it does double damage.
Interesting.
So it makes you get good at...
Instead of... Because a lot of times, in a lot of games, if you get hit mid-dodge, it, like... You're like invincible through your dodge.
Yeah, so you
that's how a lot of games
you do have iframes.
So it's like the opposite.
I think the iframes are pretty decent in Bloodborne. However, if it punishes dodging too much, which is like not a horrible thing.
That's good.
Sometimes you can.
That's good.
Yeah, sometimes you can literally tank bosses by just standing there and not dodging, because they'll do less damage overall. If you dodge and get hit mid-dodge, like, it's different than iframes. Because iframes is like, they hit, you dodge, you did it. You know, you dodged well.
Yeah.
But if you get hit in the middle of a dodge...
That's how it's supposed to be done, though.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing. You know, it's frustrating.
Yeah.
It's hard, but it's a good thing overall.
It rewards good gameplay and rewards not overusing a mechanic.
Yeah, and the weapons... Oh, let me talk about the weapons in Bloodborne. The weapons in Bloodborne are so unique. You have... The weapon list is... This is why... Dylan has talked to me about Bloodborne before. He said he wasn't the biggest fan of Bloodborne because he likes collecting items and collecting armors and doing a lot of that in the games. Bloodborne doesn't have a lot of that. Armor really doesn't matter all that much. It's almost purely for aesthetic. I'm sure that there are some discrepancies between armors, but like, armor doesn't matter, really, at the end of the day. The weapons are limited as well, but each weapon has two styles. Like, for example, one of my favorite weapons is a starting weapon that you get. It's called the Hunter's Axe, and you have like a short axe which you can chop away with, but you can also extend the axe and hold it two-handed. And you get this big spin move, and it's called spin to win, and it's like technically a cheap way to beat the game, but that's how I play the game, you know?
Yeah.
And I will openly admit that I haven't beaten Bloodborne yet. And I've restarted the game multiple times because I'm a strength character. And Bloodborne breaks you can still be a strength-based character, but it breaks down what we as a people are used to. Because there's a weapon in the game called the Kirk Hammer, and I've tried it. I've been experimenting with runs recently where I use the Kirk Hammer versus the axe. I've gotten better results out of the axe than I have the Kirk Hammer, because the Kirk Hammer is big and slow, and it's just like boom, big and wind. And visceral attacks, for example, are a big thing in Bloodborne. Like, if you charge an attack, you can stagger enemies, and then you can get like a riposte and like a visceral attack, and it just does so much damage. And that damage actually scales with your skill level, which you can put levels into, but that's getting away from the point. I've had so much better results with the axe than I have the Kirk Hammer. And the axe is faster than the Kirk Hammer.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm like...
So it's rewarding less wind up or less build up to attack.
It rewards faster play. And usually big strength guys like me are used to slower, like hit one big time, get out of there. Hit one or two big times and get out of there. With the axe,
patience play.
I like with the axe and the way that not weapon arts. I'm getting ahead of myself. The way that the weapons work is I can get in there and chop away, and then mid combo I can change the style of my weapon with an attack that, like, for example, if I'm attacking with my short little axe and I press a certain button, I can change into the long axe while also still attacking, and the combat is like fluid as hell. It's amazing.
That's really cool.
Bloodborne is the game that I've played the least out of all of them, and I haven't beaten it. I've played enough of it to understand, and I've watched tons of videos on it. Like, I know about the hard bosses. I know about... Holy moly.
Residual death.
Yeah. I know about Bloodborne. But Bloodborne as a game, I think it's just... Once I beat it, it might be better than some of the better games in this series. There are issues with it, though. Like the fact that it has not come out on PC, it's locked to 30 FPS. I think if the game was in 60 FPS, it honestly would probably... The enemies might
only for PS4, right?
Yeah. PS4 and PS5. I have it on my PS5, but it's a PS4 game.
That's crazy that they locked it. But it's a Sony exclusive, right?
Yeah, it's not on like Xbox, it's not on... So the only way to really play Bloodborne is if you're a Sony person. I've always been a Sony guy. Well,
yeah.
That is another podcast for another day. Sony versus Xbox, or the console. Oh, that's a good idea. We should do
console wars.
We should do that next week. Is the console wars?
We should. We'll need to bring somebody. Actually, I have somebody. That's a great idea. I have somebody who's an Xbox guy we can bring in.
Awesome. So we'll work on
and we
that.
can talk.
We'll workshop.
We can talk from different angles. Yeah.
Maybe we just do 2 episodes, you and me, and then bring somebody else in for a third opinion.
Yeah.
Content, anyways. All that to say is, once I beat Bloodborne, eventually, because I'm gonna be grinding it. Bloodborne, Hollow Knight, and like Lords of the Fallen have been 3 games this year that I wanted to master, and then next year I'll work on Sekiro. But I will beat Bloodborne by the end of the year, and I think it's a phenomenal game for the little that I've played. And
when you inevitably stream Bloodborne, I'm gonna watch, because I'm super interested in the gameplay. That sounds like super unique, cool gameplay to me.
It is awesome. It really is great. So let's recap.
After Bloodborne.
Let's do a chat read real quick. We only have a few.
That's fine.
Eli says...
Before we do chat read, as of right now, for those that are joining in late, we have... So from worst to best, we are ranking the Soulsborne games, and so far, we have Dark Souls 2, Sekiro, Demon Souls, and Bloodborne.
Yep. And again, these are all subject to change. I still need to play the Demon Souls remake, and I still need to beat Bloodborne and Sekiro. But the next couple games on the list, I know like the back of my hand, so don't
You're
worry
pretty
about that.
confident. Yeah.
Eli says, like, so many things, the world tendency could be cool, but I agree it is shit. Yeah, it is shit, I think.
It reminds me a lot of like the older what game is it? I think it's Jade Empire games where it's like, your decisions matter, and I mean it even reminds me of like Baldur's Gate 3 of like,
Mm-hmm.
choices that you make with NPCs and in world choices, whether you kill something or like whether you
Yeah.
make certain people like you or whatever, can make drastic decisions in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah,
knows what you're
Elon
talking
knows.
about.
Jade
Yeah.
Empire. Jade Empire is awesome. It was a game for Xbox. And they had a very similar mechanic to the World Tendency thing. You should look up Jade Empire. It's really cool. They had a similar mechanic to the World Tendency thing. It was all like Eastern based, martial arts based, but it was still like RPG combat stuff.
Here's what I'll do.
Like closed hand, or it was closed fist and open hand, and then like one was like the good side and one was the evil side, and
Right.
Depending on your interactions and how you did things, you got different endings based on where you ended up on that spectrum and stuff, and
Yeah,
people
here's what I'll
treated
do.
you differently and stuff. It's pretty cool.
Let's look it up. Hold on, I want to look it up.
Jade Empire? Yeah, it's
Empire.
pretty dope.
I'll just click on the first video that I see.
Yeah, it's a BioWare game, and like it obviously
BioWare's
it's got
Knights of
it.
the Old Republic is probably one of the better stories to come out of a
It's
working
got its
relationship between.
It's got its problems. It's got its problems. Yeah, they did. Yep. You can. Yeah, you can
Game
see.
dev in a game
Skip
like
ahead
that,
to
I
some of the
surprisingly
combat
choose
of.
Sword was where a baker keep thought less of Xbox players.
So
huh?
like,
Either way, I open a portal to fucking heaven. Honestly, last thing I thought would happen here. You could have told me that a monster appears instead of the fox spirit, or the shrine explodes, or that a portal to
like
hell
it looks
opens,
really
and all
cool
those
for the
would've been
game
less
for the
surprising.
era as
When
well.
walking into heaven, we get
'Cause it's like
greeted
a
by
kind
our
of an
next
older game.
follower, a guy
It was 2005. It's 2005.
Sorry, I had my mic muted for like 2 seconds.
Ah, excellent. I haven't heard that one before. On sheer
But yeah, for like 2005, it looks pretty good. And like, yeah, there's the combat. It reminds me of like Elder Scrolls Combat. What Elder Scrolls Combat became.
Oh yeah, so it's like a
It
third-person
kinda-
Elder Scrolls feel.
Yeah.
Neat.
But yeah, it's pretty cool. Also, the music is really, really nice.
That's cool. I like that.
Um,
I like it.
The sound design and the music really nice. But yeah, it's a very interesting game. That is kind of what the that's kind of what the World Tendency reminds me of. Yeah, I think Fable, think Knights of the Old Republic,
Mhm.
KOTOR stuff, KOTOR 1 and KOTOR 2. Yeah, it's very much in that vein, just
Yeah,
martial arts Far East vibe.
I got you. Yeah, I also my mic was. I actually was like, I should probably mute this if I cough, and then I started doing it too much, and then I forgot it was
Yeah.
on. So we'll get into it. We've been recording for about an hour so far, so I'll try to be quick with these next three. So number 3 is Dark Souls 3. Ironically, I think.
And question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Is this where you would suggest people start if they want to start somewhere other than Elden Ring?
Oh, that's a good question. Yes and no. If you did start with Dark Souls,
For Dark Souls 3?
if you start with Dark Souls 3, you won't be upset. But I feel like everybody
Okay.
should start with Dark Souls 1 first, just to have
Okay.
the Dark Souls 1. I think Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3 are where you need to start. No,
Okay.
wait a minute. Holy crap. This is actually way more nuanced than I thought. I think
We can come back to that. We can come back to that at the end if you want.
yeah. Let me think about that because that's a very
think about
very
that while
good
you're
question.
talking. Yeah, think about that while you're talking. So Dark Souls 3.
Dark Souls 3. I think honestly the top 3 games you can't go wrong if you start with any of them. How's that? My top 3. If you
Yeah,
started
that's fair.
with
That's
any
fair.
all 3 of these, you can't go wrong. Dark Souls 3 I think has the most refined combat. I think it has the best combat. The only thing I wish it had was the jump button from Elden Ring, and it would be perfect. But
Yeah.
Dark Souls isn't built around that. Dark Souls 3 has some of the best combat. I think it has the best combat in the series, personally, for me, in my taste. I think it has some of the best bosses and the best DLC in the entire... Because FromSoft DLC is amazing. I cannot wait for Elden Ring's DLC.
Yeah.
Dark Souls 3 is a lot more linear. It's not as open worldy as
Gotcha.
the other games, which is not a bad thing. It has a lot of fan service. It has callbacks to other games. It's a great way to end the Dark Souls trilogy. I think the story is really cool. It's about the fading of the flame. You know, so many people have relit the flame over time that it's starting to fade, and instead of like undead, you're an ashen one, and you're basically born of the ash of like the people who have lit the flame before. I think that's how it works. Again, don't quote me on lore. I can never remember truly. Lore is awesome. The combat is phenomenal. The weapons are great. It allows for my favorite playstyle, which is like big bulky weapon, fast rolling. I don't really care too much about armor and poise. So poise is a mechanic in the game to where like if you get hit, you can withstand the hit, and the less poise you have, the more knocked around you're gonna get. It doesn't really matter
Gotcha.
in games like Dark Souls 2. Also, one thing I forgot to mention about Dark Souls 2 is it has an extra stat called adaptability, which increases your iframes, which is stupid as fuck. Like, if you don't invest any into it, you have like no iframes or hardly any iframes, and like you roll and you can still roll, but you still get hit. But you're still in the middle of a roll animation. It's just bad. It's
Yeah.
horrible. It's one of my least favorite things. But
Anyway,
Dark
that's
Souls 3, it's just like you roll and everything feels fair. Everything feels good. Everything feels awesome in Dark Souls 3. It's not as colorful as like Dark Souls 1 or Dark Souls 2 even. Dark Souls 2 is a very colorful game. There are beautiful areas into it, but it is much more muted. But I think it's done that way on purpose. Hold on. Okay. So it is much more. I think it's intentionally done. It's supposed to be muddy. It's supposed to be drab. It's supposed to be that way because of the story and what's taking place in the game. Honestly, I think the less I have to say about the games, the better. Because I think Dark Souls 3, as its own streamlined, it's a great place to start if you want to just experience combat. And it's so good. The DLC, I think my favorite boss fight of all time is from Dark Souls 3. And it's not like the traditional
Gotcha.
one. It's a DLC boss, but it's not like the DLC boss that everybody talks about, even though that one is phenomenal. Again, I'm not going to spoil it, but it's just awesome. I love Dark Souls 3. I love just the weapons. I like the linearity because it focuses more on combat than it does anything else.
Gotcha.
And I love that about the game.
So
I
they
don't-
basically said, like, we're going to take everything that we do the best at, that we've
Yeah.
done the best in all of these games so far, and put it in one game.
It really is. It really is. It's not as, like, I don't think it's as memorable as, like, a Dark Souls 1 because, you know, that's an
Sure.
unforgettable
And
experience.
Dark Souls 3 is 2016.
It's phenomenal. Like, that's really all I have to say about
Yeah.
Dark Souls 3. Not that it's I mean, it's the third game in the thing, but it's just I love, like we've talked about before on the show, how I like Breath of the Wild more than Tears of the Kingdom because it's a more streamlined, condensed experience. I like condensed experiences like that. I like the fact that it is
Gotcha.
just what you see is what you get. It is just straightforward, whoop ass, build a cool character, whoop some more ass, get good, experience some awesome combat and bosses. If it was just that for me, it'd still be where it is on my list because I love it that much.
Yeah.
I could pick it up anytime, play it. I know the game like the back of my hand. I know where to get everything. I know where to like how to build my character, where to do this, what to do next, and all that stuff. And like I love it. Number 2 is Dark Souls 1. Dark Souls, the original Dark Souls, again, like you said, if you were to start with the first Dark Souls, that is the only game that I could say if you did a blind playthrough, it would be the experience. Because Dark Souls 1 is frustrating, but it's also accessible in a lot of ways. It's one of the most accessible games in the series. Like, Dark Souls 3 is also accessible, which I really love. But Dark Souls 1, it has a little bit of everything. It has, you have to think about the combat's a little slower. Poise is king in that game. If you have poise, you can just whoop everything's ass. But you can also be a dex build and dodge everything if you want. You can also be like a magic build, faith build, like they got cool things in between. Dark Souls 1 has a little bit of everything. And it is like...
Yeah, I've seen a lot of gameplay of Dark Souls 1. Just like in general.
That is the only game in the series that I would be like, if you didn't look anything up, that's fine. I hate blind playthroughs of the Souls games. We've talked about that before on the podcast. But I am very anti that. Dark Souls 1 is the only game I'd be like, try your best not to look anything up. Because it's like the most fair. There are beginner's traps. There are like some janky bullshit. There is that. But like I still think it is one of the most accessible experiences to experience blind. The story is very simple, but it's well executed. It's awesome. I love it. It's a colorful world. The world interconnectivity is just brilliant. It was kind of done on accident and on purpose at the same time. Like they tried to do it, but I don't think they realized how well they did it. However, Dark Souls 1 is not free of criticism. Because the first half of the game up to like Ornstein and Smough, which is like what is probably the most popular boss in the entire series. From the beginning of Dark Souls 1 to Ornstein and Smough is like a masterpiece. Perfect execution. Brilliant game. Second half of Dark Souls 1 is kind of ass.
Really?
Because I think they had like time constraints and they just had to rush certain things. Like while Dark Souls 1 has some of the best bosses in the series, it also has the bit of goddamn chaos, which is easily the worst boss in any of these games. It's a platforming gimmick mini boss, or it's like not a mini boss. It's a platforming main boss in a game that isn't a platformer. And it's so bad. I cheese it every time. There's a cheese you can do to where you exit out in the game and you can like soft quit and then you like respawn outside the boss door every time you have to hit it like 3 times essentially. And I'll go in, I'll hit the first one, quit out, go back in, go to the other side, shoot it with an arrow from a distance so I don't have to run up to it. And then I'll do the last part, which is the platforming bit, and it's just that's the only way I can do it without wanting to grow hair just to rip it out. And then just like, but the final boss of Dark Souls 2 thematically is so like brilliant. And like, there's so much brilliance in that game that it overshadows its flaws by a ton. And the DLC is amazing. Like the DLC bosses, again, some of my favorite bosses in the entire series come from the Dark Souls 1 DLC. Like almost the last boss, I think it would be considered the final boss of the Dark Souls 1 DLC, is almost like a Dark Souls 3 boss, where speed wise, because it's just it's super fast, but you have to adapt with the slower combat, which is cool. I've done it with a big bulky character. I've done it with a dex character and dodged. So I've done it both ways, and it's fun either way. But Dark Souls 1.
So here's a good thing when we're talking Dark Souls. 1 specifically, it's the only game that's on every system.
Yeah, it's on the Switch. That bitch is on
that's
the
what I'm
Switch.
saying. It's the only game that's on every system.
Yeah.
You played it on the Switch. How was that playing on the Switch? How did it handle it?
It is a lesser experience than playing it on something more
Sure.
powerful. Like, I think...
Sure, as you expect.
Yeah, I think the best way to play... This might be controversial, too. I think the best way to play Dark Souls 1 is through the Dark Souls remaster that was released on, like, PC. Or a powerful, like,
Okay.
PS4. At least PS4. Because... I think PC is the best way to experience it with a controller. I've seen people play Monster Hunter and Elden Ring and stuff like that with a mouse and keyboard. I don't know how people do it, but they do it.
Yeah.
Also, I've seen speedrunners, like the best Super Mario Brothers player in the world, or one of the best Super Mario Brothers speedruns it on a mouse and keyboard, or on a keyboard specifically. And I'm like, what the fuck?
That's crazy.
It is crazy, but like, if that's how it works for you, that's great. I don't think I could ever do it. But a lot of people, when the Dark Souls remake or remaster came out, they were pissed because they're like, it's $40. Nothing was changed. Whatever. And I'm just like, I don't want it to change. They're like, this is an insulting remaster and stuff like that. I'm like, I don't think so. It's $40 to play the game.
It's also for new people.
It's like preservation
It's for people
of the
that-
original. And I like...
Well, yeah, that too.
Mhm.
But the fact that they remastered it made it available to a wider audience.
Yeah, because a remaster and a remake is completely different. If we had a Demon Souls remake and a remaster, like if you remastered
Yeah.
Demon Souls from like what it was and just up-res the graphics but kept everything the same, it would be perfect. But the remake changes certain things about it that make it a lesser experience.
Sure.
So if Dark Souls 2 was remastered and they kept everything the same, it was just up-res graphics, I'd still probably play it. I wish they would fix certain things, but they would also be preserving that. Because a lot of people really
Yeah.
do love Dark Souls 2, and they love the way it is. So again, this is all very nuanced and subjective, but like,
Sure.
I thought that the remaster... Oh yeah, and they, like the, Blighttown is an infamous area because it's like, it runs at like 6 FPS. It runs like shit on the original.
Mm-hmm.
It's horrible. It's a horrible experience. Runs perfectly smooth in the remaster. Like butter. It's amazing. And
You would suggest if somebody's getting into the Dark Souls born games, Dark Souls 1, to get the general vibe, to get the general feel, it's where you pick
just
up and
get
play.
the remaster. It's like $40.
It's also
It's worth
it's also accessible to literally everybody.
Yeah, if you have a
if they
Switch,
want
you can
to
play it.
try
It
it
is a
out.
lesser experience
That's
on the
what I'm
Switch,
saying.
but it is an experience.
But like for people that
yeah.
But I'm saying otherwise, people might not be able to play it. at
Yeah,
all.
you could play Dark Souls 1 on a plane. That is crazy.
That's pretty crazy.
That's nut. I mean, I
Yeah.
guess you could on a high-powered gaming PC too. But
I
like,
guess, but the battery's only gonna last for like 45 minutes.
right. But you know, all that to say, Dark Souls 1 is a masterpiece. It does so many things right. I think the
Yeah.
remaster is good. I understand why people don't like it because they didn't fix like the PvP, and PvP is important to a lot of people. I didn't talk about PvP this entire time because I don't do it. I'm ass at it. I don't enjoy it because I'm not good. Just very simple. I'm way too
Yeah.
competitive for that. But there are people that specialize, like YouTubers that. There's a guy named PvP Skills, for example, who specializes in PvP and builds for PvP and stuff like that. He's awesome. But like, all that to say, I think Dark Souls 1 is like, you can't go wrong with it. There are aspects of the game, but that
Sure.
kind of adds
It's
to
just
the
old.
charm. It's an older game. It adds to the charm. Like, even the Bed of Chaos, as crappy as it is a memorable experience for how crappy it is. And, like, all these things come together to make Dark Souls 1. And I'll never forget that experience as long as I live. Number 1 is Elden Ring, because, duh. Holy fuck.
Because
Holy shit, it's Elden fucking Ring. It's Elden fucking Ring. I'm pointing at my tattoo for all the... I also have a Dark Souls 1 tattoo. I have the Sunlight Covenant tattoo on me. I need to get my Bloodborne tattoo. I want to get it like right here, like the hunter symbol. Like I want to get it like right in between these two. But Elden fucking Ring. Holy
it's Elden
shit.
Ring, baby.
It's Elden Ring, baby.
It broke the internet.
It won Game of the Year in 2022. Who talks like that? 2022.
2022.
Oh, where do I even begin? The combat, the world, the lore, the experience, the open world, so Fextra Life is a channel, and they post Elden Ring build videos, and they do like beginner builds, mid game builds, end game builds, new game plus builds. That playlist is like 128 videos long. There is so much custom. You could do and be anything you want in Elden Ring. If you can think of it, you could do it. If you see it, you can go there. If you it just gives the player so much freedom to just fuck around and find out, and it's awesome for that. Now, I've watched plenty of videos criticizing Elden Ring, and the criticisms are valid. I think I'll just get this out of the way. Elden Ring is an experience. I wish I could wipe my brain and have it all fresh to me again.
Do it again.
That's like, if I had to pick a game to do that, it'd be Elden Ring. Because the first time you see, you go down the Siofra well, and you see the underground city for the first time, and you just look up and it's all glowy and purple. It's like, I found that by accident. Like, I didn't look that up, and I found it, and I was like, oh, like, it was I wish I could. It's like seeing Irithyll of the Boreal Valley in Dark Souls 3 for the first time. It's like seeing Anor Londo in Dark Souls 1 for the first time. It's like, it makes me want to be violent. I want to throw the speaker right now just because I love it. It's like when you see a cute dog or a cute pet and you just love it so much that you just want to pet it and just show how much you love it, and you're just like, I fucking love this fucking thing.
Yeah.
Like, that's how I get when I talk about Elden Ring. I'm so passionate about Elden Ring, it's not even funny. I think some of the bosses are overtuned difficulty-wise.
Okay.
Bosses like Melania, for example, busted as shit. I think that they went
No reason to be
overboard.
that hard.
So Melania has a dance technically, a move called Waterfowl Dance, which is just like just insane. It's like the craziest fucking move in any of these games. It's just like, but she also has lifesteal. So if she hits you at all, even if you block, she gets health back. And she's got a huge health pool. Even at with my level 150 pure strength Unga Bunga character, I hit her and I do peanuts worth of damage to her. Her health is too big. If you tweak one thing, if you get rid of either lifesteal or waterfowl, it'd be a perfect boss. But a lot of people maintain that opinion that Melania is overtuned. I agree. I think some of the bosses are too aggressive, and every boss in the game, you can beat the game without taking a hit. Gino Machino has done it so many times. He's my favorite in the realm of, I've talked about it multiple times on the podcast about how he's just he has just mastered that game. You can dodge every attack in the game. It is possible. It's hard, but it's possible. But I know
people do no-hit runs.
Yeah, my counter argument to the overtuned bosses and the bullshit in Elden Ring, which it exists, Elden Ring offers the most amount of solutions to their problems. You can use summons. You can change your build. There are like 18.
Similar to how we talked about like the Tears of the Kingdom aspects of like
Yeah.
finding problems to the things can be whatever you want it to be. There's a million and one ways to solve the problems of whatever is put in front of you.
Oh yeah, there's summons, there's a million different spells, a million different incantations, a million different ways to build a character. There are 18 items called the larval tier, which you can use to reset your build at a certain point in the game. You could do it 18 times. And like, if you're struggling with a boss, like if a boss resists magic and you're a mage build, just switch to a melee build. Or if a boss resists fire and you're mainly like a fire build, switch to that. The last boss, Radagon. I know I didn't spoil some of the other bosses for these Souls games, but I have to talk about the bosses in Elden Ring because you have to. Also, I'm going to break the tradition and read this. It says, Gordon Schultz, full name. The number of balance changes they had made to Elden Ring demonstrates how massive the game is. There was no way FromSoft could have tested everything. 1.0 was wild. That's true. For example, the boss Radahn is one of the best bosses in the series, one of my favorites. They had to nerf him because he did way too much damage for that point in the game. Yeah, the boss Radagon. Radagon is one of my favorite bosses in the entire series as well. I had to change my entire build just to beat him the first time I beat him because my build wasn't good enough. And I wasn't good enough as a player, nor was my build good enough for him. So I had to change to something I was more comfortable with, and then I whooped his ass. Eventually, whooped his ass. Without using summons or whatever. And that's another thing. I don't want anybody to gatekeep how anybody plays Elden Ring because that's going to deter players from Elden Ring. Caden, my roommate, he was like, should I play Elden Ring? And I was like, yes, you should play Elden Ring. It is so accessible. I'm like, if you get stuck, look stuff up. Look up a build guide. Find ways that you like to play and then cater that to you specifically. You can do the blind run, but I think the best experience is figuring out how you like to play Elden Ring and then going into it and whooping its ass.
Yeah.
I've beaten Elden Ring like 5 times now. I just started a brand new character, so I'm working on my 6th. I love Elden Ring and the jump mechanic, that they had a dedicated jump button to it, and they added some platforming to it, and it works. It's awesome.
The adventure aspect, the scalability of it. I think they had to add some form of like enhancing the maneuverability if they're going to make an open world game.
That and they add a level of verticality to the combat. For example, you can dodge attacks by either rolling through it. Like if a big sword swipes below, you can either roll through it or you hop over it. And that just gives you tools to solve the problems. There are, however, some of the worst bosses in the series are in Elden Ring because it's almost like they just didn't give a shit. Like the Godskin Duo. I made a video on the Godskin Duo, and like on YouTube, I'm technically like a nobody. It is sitting at like 55,000 views. Like everybody hates the shit out of that boss because it's ass. It's like the reason Ornstein and Smo, the reason people like it was so iconic is because the bosses were balanced as much as they could have been for the time. Ornstein is fast and moves around. Smo is slower. You also have the arena to like block them so you can position yourself, choose which one you want to fight, which one you're best at, and then you can fight the next phase. In Elden Ring, the Godskin Duo, they move at the same fucking speed, and it's lightning fast. They respawn when you kill them. The arena doesn't fucking do shit. They can destroy it. It just doesn't. Everything about it is wrong and bad. So I'm not going to sit here and act like Elden Ring has no flaws because it absolutely does. For example, okay, I understand the argument that like Elden Ring's experience, like if you do it your first time and you beat it, you're like, oh fuck, Elden Ring, oh, that was awesome. And you play through it a second time, a third time, a fourth time, you'll never get that first playthrough back. You just won't. Replayability is it kind of is lessened because it's like there's so much to do. Because I like doing everything. I like doing all the dungeons. I like doing all the caves and the catacombs and doing it because I feel completed when I do that with every character. I just like playing it that way.
Yeah.
But people might get burnt out on that. It's like, oh, I got to do this again. I got to do this again. I got to do that again. I understand that. I think as an overall package, Elden Ring is the most accessible. It has... I still think Dark Souls 3 combat is better slightly because the bosses are tuned to the combat. The only boss that I don't think in Dark Souls 3 that is tuned to that is Sister Frida in the DLC, which it feels like a Bloodborne boss. And Bloodborne is a little too fast for Dark Souls. Little bit. But that's an argument for another day.
Gotcha. Sure.
Elden Ring, the combat's amazing. The lore is amazing. The weapons are amazing. The spells are amazing. The builds are amazing. The open world is amazing. The horse combat is a little jank, but like for horse combat, I think they fucking nailed it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's great. But there are some bosses that, like the very final boss, the Elden Beast, is in a big arena and you can't use the horse. That's stupid. But like the fire giant, you can use the horse. You know? So like...
Man.
But everything the Elden Ring is, to me, it is my favorite video game of all time. I think all of the good in Elden Ring just squashes the bad. I can replay that game anytime, anywhere, any place, try something new, do something I've done again, just because I want to experience it again. Because I just love it. I'm so passionate about Elden Ring. That's why I think it is the best FromSoft game. And like you said, if you start with the top 3, can't go wrong. I think Elden Ring, if I'm like, you have to play one, play Elden Ring first.
Okay, so that was going to be the question, is if you were to start with one.
If I had any influence over it, I'd say start with Elden Ring. Because holy shit.
Yeah.
But if you started with Dark Souls 1 or 3, you would also be just as valid, and it would
Dark
be
Souls.
just as awesome.
Dark Souls 1 is for accessibility. Dark Souls 3 is because you have it, or
it's
you
combat. It's
try.
pure combat.
It's combat. Yeah.
Elden
if you
Ring
like
is
the combat better.
Elden Ring is a mix of both of that.
So, full game rankings from Brooksy. Every Soulsborne game ranked worst to best, worst starting at Dark Souls 2, Sekiro Shatters Die Twice, Demon Souls, Bloodborne, and then the top 3 are Dark Souls 3, Dark Souls 1, and then Elden Ring at the top.
Yep, and we're capping this off
Sitting
at like
the little
hour and a half.
King that it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hour
Like
and a
the little
half.
king
Yeah.
that it is.
And that's pretty much it. Do you have any final questions, Andrew, for me? Any sort of things that you're...
Not really. You explained everything really well, and I was trying to like pull up just some like differentiating research. It also seems like for you, is there an expectation for the next game that they make? Because it kind of seems like every 2 to 3 years they make one, right?
Elden Ring is going to be hard to top.
Yeah.
You know what would be...
I mean, they're working on the DLC right now, so maybe they'll just sit on Elden Ring for a really long time and just like make more DLC
the Elden
for it.
Ring DLC.
Is that what you're thinking?
My expectations for the DLC is like through the roof. It's like it's out in space. That's how high my expectations are.
Yeah.
And I think FromSoft knows that, so they're like, "Oh, we got to make it. We got to make it as good as we can." I think the Elden Ring DLC is going to kick fucking ass. My expectations for future games, you know what would be really cool is if you had like, could you imagine one of these games in like a Western style, like a Red Dead Redemption type style?
Yeah, that's kind of what Bloodborne gives me the vibe of, except it was more gothic. Based on the
Bloodborne is more
like more gothic horror.
It's more gothic Victorian England, like think Edgar Allan Poe, and you're there.
But you could But you could or like what was that? What's that? Lies of P, like
Oh
that
yeah,
kind of
Lies of
vibe.
and I haven't played Lies of P, but from what I've seen of it,
But, like,
they take the Pinocchio
yeah.
lore and make it badass.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah,
hilarious.
It seems very
think.
similar. It seems very similar to like the style of gameplay though. From
Oh
a
yeah,
Bloodborne
the
perspective.
possibilities I feel like are endless from the studio
But I
that
guess
started
you could probably take the general gameplay vibe from Bloodborne and turn it into a Western though,
Oh, dude, if you had
with
like a
different lore.
you could so this is just pure speculation at this point. So
Sure.
you take the Elden Ring formula, put it in a Western, but
Okay.
emphasize
Open world, larger scaling mechanics. Maybe emphasize the exploration a little bit more.
what if you
than
emphasized
what they would do.
guns over melee weapons this time?
Sure.
Because Bloodborne, you
Yeah.
use the guns as like, I mean, there were firearm weapons that could like the flame sprayer, for example. You could just pour fire on shit. You had big guns. You had weapons like the stake driver, which is pseudo like you just pump a stake into somebody, but it's like a charged up
Yeah.
explosion type shotgun effect essentially.
Yeah.
You have like pistols that like they do damage, right? And they if you level up a certain stat, you can do a specific amount of damage with them, but they're mainly used for utility rather than damage. So, what if you flip
Yeah.
that on its head, make it a Western, focus more on ranged combat than you do melee combat? You still have melee combat, but you could be like a strength character would be like a shotgun, like or a dex character could be more like a gunslinger, you know, like a like that kind of. I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm just talking out of my brain right now.
You
Or
could still do swords because like Western had those
Yeah.
Western still had like the older like Civil War style
Yeah.
swords and stuff. Like that's still a thing. So you could be more of a swashbuckler with like a swashbuckler with a pistol. And
Yeah.
instead of magic, you get like magical shots or something.
what
like
if you
that.
through like a
Instead of you
pirate
doing
in there,
magic,
like pirates or something
Yeah.
like that somehow, and like,
Yeah.
oh, dude, Gordon Schultz said teams up with HBO and makes a Westworld game. If you know anything about Westworld.
So a Westworld, a Westworld game would kind of be in what my brain is kind of imagining this like, where it's like Western meets mechanics, kind
and
of deal.
I've never
And they
played.
could combine a lot of the aspects from the Soulsborne kind of games, with some of the Armored Core
Oh yeah.
aspects,
Oh, and think about
like
this,
in
dude.
one game.
Think about
That'd be
this.
kinda
You
cool.
make like a. What if it was like a steampunk type deal,
Yeah.
where that's like
Yeah.
that takes Western
and still
plus
and
technology.
still take both aspects from both of those games, but make the game itself steampunk,
Yeah.
so it's not anywhere close
I
to
think
the other two games.
Lies of P,
That would be really cool.
Lies of P, from what I've seen, kind of has like a steampunk edge to it.
It does. It does.
But it's
I want
not-
to play
it's-
that game so bad.
It's not fully committed. If you've seen the show like Arcane, kind of, but that's based on like World of Warcraft. But like they have
Yeah.
sort of kind of like a steampunky kind of civilization kind of deal, but they also have like magic and stuff like that. But like that would be cool. Or what if they just like, I know Armored Core is like mechs and stuff like that, but what if you went if you went pure sci-fi, like Aliens but with Bloodborne? Imagine fighting a boss like
Yeah.
the Xenomorph in Elden Ring style combat,
Yeah.
like with like
Yeah, dude. Well, I'm looking at Lies of P gameplay right now. No, it's pretty Victorian steampunk.
that's cool. Well, there's so many elements of things that you could do. I personally would love to see a Western, kind of like taking the aspects of like games like Assassin's Creed or Red Dead Redemption and taking influences from those games and making them into like a Soulsborne experience. And, you know, I've never played Red Dead 1 or 2, but I've heard and seen that those games are phenomenal experiences, so it would never take away from what Red Dead has already done. I've played... The only Assassin's Creed game I've really ever played is the mobile one. for like...
Really?
Yeah. and it was cool for what it was. But like, I played a little bit of Assassin's Creed. Not the biggest Assassin's Creed fan in the world. If you like it, that's awesome. But I don't personally like those games that like generally. But if you take the style of like, I don't know, like, what if you did one in like a Viking setting with mythology, or they did one of like, could you imagine an Elden Ring style game based on Greek mythology? Like God of War,
dude, I'm
Soulsborne.
So I'm reading a book. Right now, called The Will of the Many, and it's very much like high fantasy magic system meets Roman gladiator, like Roman Empire type.
Dude, if you
stuff.
had like a Colosseum,
It's really sick.
Imagine a Colosseum like side port, because they do have like Elden Ring has a Colosseum, right? And it's for like PvP. They have like PvP style things in these games. But what if you had like a Roman Colosseum type thing, but like Elden Ring combat, where it's like not just people killing each other in melee, but it's like high fantasy. Like you've got spells and you've got like incantations and you've got like crazy wild shit
and
going on.
These monsters are like raids and
huge
stuff.
Monsters and like all this stuff. Like, yeah, dude.
That'd be sick. That'd be sick.
There's so many ideas that you could do. And what if they did something crazy like ancient, so like kind of like the Far Cry, like Far Cry. Didn't Far Cry do like an ancient, like you're sort of like, I forgot what Far Cry it was. Oh, Far Cry. It's like Far Cry 5. Far Cry 5.
I'm gonna, while you're looking that up, Eli. That's funny. I'm working on a fantasy story in a more Roman setting as opposed to medieval. Eli, you should read "The Will of the Many" by James Islington. Islington. I can't remember how to say his last name. It's fantastic. I'm reading it right now. I'm almost probably like 15 chapters left in the book. It's like a 75 chapter book.
Mm-hmm.
It's so good, dude. It's like got a great magic system. Based on people ceding to somebody at a higher, level of them, in the hierarchy is what it's called, and then you also have all of the, like Roman inspired like backstabbing and so you have like all the what's the word that like the what's the word I'm trying to think of? Oh my goodness. All of the like
Are you talking about like combat styles?
No. Well, the combat's really cool. The combat's really like they use some swords, but they also like just fist punch the crap out of each other sometimes, which is sick. But they can use what's called the will to like enhance themselves or enhance magic, like raise platforms and do it's crazy. But then also you have all of the like the political intrigue side of things, of people trying to backstab each other and like having one person being controlled. Yeah, exactly. But having like one person being controlled by like 3 different factions, and that one person trying to like subvert all of the aspects of everybody trying to use him for his own gain. It's so good.
That's sick.
It's
also,
so good.
The game I was thinking of is Far Cry Primal.
Great book.
That is sort of like
yes.
Could you think of like a primal sort of Souls, but you're fighting like
prehistoric.
You fucking fight a megalodon. And Eli said, I still want a Garchomp style land shark dragon in the Souls game, like Monster Hunter. Like you have the Cephadrome.
Yeah, dude.
That would be sick.
Yeah, dude.
I guess I'll end this off with reading the chat, and then we'll be good. It's an hour and a half, a little over an hour and a half of just me gushing about Souls games. Josh B, what's up, Josh B? Hope you're doing good. Dr. Death, hope you're doing well. Sorry. Dr. Deathwish, I hope you're having a wonderful day. Andrew and I are recovering from some illnesses, but we're doing okay. We managed to get through this episode, which
We're
is
doing
great.
all right.
This has been a good one. Even with the expectations of the DLC are high, don't be surprised when FromSoft exceeds them from Gordon Schultz. Yeah.
that's fair.
I know they will. I have faith. And then Eli is talking about ambition and intrigue, and he's working on the fantasy story. They're more of a Roman setting as opposed to medieval. Yeah, I think the Roman and I think that and Greek mythology would be my top 3 expectations for, or top 3, I guess, desires for future FromSoft type games. Western, pure sci-fi,
Some sort of Greek or Roman mythology.
Greek or Roman mythology. I think that would be awesome. God of War, the new God of Wars have kind of done that, but they're more of more of a condensed, streamlined experience, which is great.
Sure.
I haven't played them, but I've heard that they're phenomenal and they're amazing. However, putting the FromSoft, dude, imagine fighting Zeus, but FromSoft, Zeus. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Pump that into my veins. But yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah, dude.
Andrew, you want to end us off today?
Yes. Hey, everybody, thanks so much for listening to the Things We Like podcast as me and Brooke are healing slowly. If you are enjoying this and you want to check it out after the fact, we use all of the footage that we get from this live stream today and we put it on the channel over at Things We Like Pod on YouTube. We also have a podcast on all podcast players and places that you receive or listen to podcasts, so feel free to check it out and subscribe there, as well as give it a like or subscribe. That's the best thing you can do, and share it with a friend. But outside of that, Brooks, send us off.
Love you guys. Thank you so much. Play Elden Ring, play Elden Ring, play Elden Ring, play Elden Ring, and of course, play Elden Ring. There you go. So we're done recording. This is a good episode. I have to leave the live stream because, full disclosure, I'm going to shit myself. Andrew brings out the best and the worst in me.
Yay!
The older I get, the funnier poop gets. Whatever.
Yep.
Love you guys so much. Love you, Andrew.